Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we are giving an update on PPP and other resources available to Minnesota businesses. First, I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, and we'll be hearing from Troy Rosenbrook, the president today. Romaine Berg is the digital marketing agency, and Voyager U, a community to build an independent lifestyle and work. To participate in the comments section today, make sure you are watching on YouTube. And while you are there, please hit the subscribe and like button. We need your help. Allow us to specialized content to fit your needs, as well as let you know when we are going live. Also, you can catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce today's guests. As I mentioned, Troy Rosenbrook and Kathi Schaff. Kathi and Troy, welcome.
Thank you, Rick.
And let's start with, first of all, again, if you want to submit a question, go to the comments field. You will find how to get a hold of Troy there, as well as Kathi, their email addresses, and you can also ask your questions. Kathi and Troy, let's start with getting a little bit of information on yourself, your background, your firm, the various activities that you're up to. And Kathi, how about we start with you?
Great, thank you, Rick. I'm Kathi Schaff, and I'm director of the Grow Minnesota program and economic development program at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. I've been there 15 years, and prior to that, worked 13 years for a Fortune 500 company. I've been in chamber work, though, for over 20 years. And I've served 8 years as a city planning commissioner. So I've seen all sides of economic development from public to private sector. The Grow Minnesota program is a statewide economic development program that started in 2003. And is focused on retaining and growing Minnesota businesses of all sizes and industry sectors.
Okay, and I'm not going to let you move ahead because before we started today, talked a little bit about the football this weekend. So tell us about your favorite team and what's going to happen.
Green Bay Packers win. Drop the mic. Yeah.
All right. You heard it here first. Kathy's on the record saying the Packers are going to win this weekend. All right, Troy, tell us a little bit about you, Highland Bank, and what you're up to.
Sure, thanks, Rick. Troy Rosenbrook, I'm the president here at Highland Bank. As Rick said, we're a locally owned community bank in the Twin Cities with 5 locations. I've been in banking for about 38 years, roughly. In addition to spending my time in the office here, I am also on the board of the Conservation Corps of Minnesota and Iowa, which is an organization that helps with youth development and nature conservancy. And so I spent some time there as a board member and treasurer. In addition to that, as Rick knows, I have a little cabin over in Wisconsin, and allows during pandemic times to escape some of the city and the closeness that we've all had this last year. So that's my report.
All right, and then given that your main residence is in Minnesota, but you have the cabin in Wisconsin, as far as the Packers go this weekend, which side are you going to play?
Well, it's hard for me to cheer for the Packers, but I do have a son-in-law that is a fan, and I'll be helping him and my daughter move, and they live over in Wisconsin. So I'll have to play nice and say things like, "Oh, that was a nice play," but I can't really cheer.
All right, fair enough. I hear you on that, definitely. All right, Troy, let's start with you. Why don't you give us a brief overview of the new or second draw of PPP funds? Talk a little bit about who's eligible and what expenses are covered.
Sure. So as Rick said, it's really referenced as a second draw. And we'll maybe come back to that because there are some options for people that didn't participate in the first go around to still access some money. But the second draw is really for those people that had an earlier PPP loan They've changed the rules and targeted it a bit more. So the number of employees has been reduced to 300. And you have to show, I think the key thing is you have to show a decrease in gross receipts, gross revenues by 25% year over year, quarter over previous year's quarter. And so I think that's really the driver for most businesses to be able to show that decrease. They've also reduced the amount. Before that was up to $10 million, and now the maximum amount is $2 million.
Okay.
This will be open until March 31, assuming that they don't run out of money, prior to that. So that's kind of the main points behind who's eligible. The expenses that are covered have expanded from the last time. They include, expenses related to property damage that wasn't otherwise paid for through insurance. They include supplier costs, some worker protection or PPE costs that might have been part of it. So there's been an expansion of what the covered expenses are, obviously including payroll and those other salary-related expenses. And in terms of how much people qualify, that has also changed. For most borrowers, it's 2.5 times the average monthly payroll cost. And so it's perhaps a little simpler calculation. There are some adjustments for seasonality. And there is an opportunity for certain industries, those with NAICS codes that start with a 72, to get up to 3.5 times monthly payroll costs. And without going into a lot of detail, those are generally hospitality kinds of businesses that were more immediately, directly impacted. So that's really primarily sort of, who's available or who can access these funds, what expenses are covered, and the amount that they can access in this next round.
And Highland was quite active in the first round. Maybe just give a high-level overview of that.
Sure. For us, we did 585 loans, about $108 million, in a rather short period of time. For us, that kind of represents about 2 years worth of loans. And to give you some other context, our sort of core commercial loan portfolio at that point was maybe about $330 million. So essentially an additional 1/3 increase in our PPP funding. So we were really pretty proud of that, and couldn't have done it. I have to do a shout out to any of the employees who are listening, because man, everyone just stepped up and did things that they don't normally have to do during their sort of normal part of their day. And it was just really and that's true with a lot of banks that had people step up, put in long hours, and do other tasks that they weren't otherwise assigned to do. So it was a great experience.
Well, good. Well, thanks for doing that, for leading Highland Bank through that period, and for your support of the local business community. Thank you. Troy, for the folks that received earlier PPP loans, talk a little bit about what the forgiveness process looks like.
Yeah, it has been evolving several different times. Would be where you want to start. And so it will be evolving again. But the good news is that for loans under $150,000, there is a much more abbreviated application that is still pending. We haven't received it yet. So, I want to make that clear that once again, we're waiting on that application, but it is much more reliant upon certifications of the borrowers that they did certain things and qualified for certain things, versus necessarily having to put together the somewhat significant volume of paper to support their forgiveness. Now, I would say that all of those loans are still subject to some kind of audit by SBA, and so I think it's prudent by all of those borrowers' parts to gather that information, put it someplace in the event someone comes knocking on the door in the future, that they have the ability to prove up what they have certified as part of the process. But I know for us, and I think for a lot of other SBA lenders, our advice right now for those borrowers that have loans under 150 is to just take a pause on submitting their applications for forgiveness, because they'll shortly that they may want to take advantage of.
Okay. Shifting gears over to you, Kathi. First of all, maybe talk a little bit about what it's been like at the Minnesota Chamber and for yourself going through the last 10 months. And just curious what things were like for you.
Sure. Well, our Grow Minnesota program, as I mentioned, and as part of the Minnesota Chamber, is really focused on retaining and growing businesses. So you can imagine when March, whatever it was, 16th or whatever that date was hit, that things really changed for us. And we focused our time on helping businesses navigate what was going on with COVID-19 and finding the resources they needed, answering their questions. So since March of last year, we have to date assisted through Grow Minnesota about 2,000 Minnesota businesses with everything from helping them draft their return to work safely plans, helping them with on-site testing at their businesses, working on just navigating that whole alphabet soup of resources that were out there. And with the PPP, helping them understand what the first program was about, who could qualify, what it meant, is it a loan? Is it not a loan? Is it, the questions were just crazy. And I think one of my most interesting return to work safely was a church. I had never really thought about what you have to do for communion, what you have to do for everything related to a church service. And so it's been a very interesting time, and I'm proud to say that the assistance we provided, 98% of that was returned to the businesses in 24 hours, and the other 2% in 48. So because we are business, we understand the need was right now needed it. So we turned those things around quickly.
So Kathi, the Minnesota Chamber's website is mnchamber.com. Whereabouts on the website might folks learn more about your Grow Minnesota program?
It will say, I think the tab is Grow Your Business.
Okay.
And there's a drop down within there for a lot of different programs.
Okay. All right. So speaking of those programs and resources, beyond the PPP, tell folks a little bit about what's available to support Minnesota businesses at the Minnesota Chamber website.
Sure. And one thing I'd like to add on the PPP is I'd really encourage all of the Minnesota businesses that are on this webinar to reach out to your legislators. Now, the federal government in December 2020 had made the forgivable PPP loans completely tax exempt and not taxable income, but Minnesota does not automatically conform. It's going to require a legislative decision. So it's one thing the Minnesota Chamber is going to be working on right away this session, is getting Minnesotans to conform to the federal governments. So that said, we have many programs and resources that we can link businesses to and that we have ourselves at the Minnesota Chamber. One of the areas, and I will be sharing links with Rick to share with participants for a lot of these things, but we have a 24/7 economic development resource database that is regional state resources in 7 key categories. So part of the Minnesota Chamber's Grow Minnesota program is ongoing visits with Minnesota businesses, and we've done 13,400 visits since 2003. And those 7 key categories that we put resources in are based on the responses of what businesses tell us most that they need. So that's everything from workforce assistance, technical assistance, expansion plan, assistance starting a business, export, import activities, and business financing. I would encourage businesses to, PPP and a lot of things that are out there right now are limited time-wise. They're going to be out there and then gone. But there's a lot of things, massive amount of resources in Minnesota that are there year round in those categories that I mentioned. So really check with your cities, with your counties, with small business administration. We have an excellent district office here in Minnesota, SCORE chapters, organizations like Hill Capital Corporation that provide another opportunity to get equity. Launch Minnesota, which was launched by the Department of Employment and Economic Development, that will help technology startups, innovative companies. So really check out our resources online. And then we also can help businesses connect to the right people at those resources. And that's really what our directory does. So we want to eliminate frustration and time on the part of business to get to the right people. Right now, too, separate from PPP is the state of Minnesota funding that went down to counties for businesses impacted by the latest Executive Order 99. And those funds, I will just let businesses know, when Troy mentioned the NAICS code 72, literally with the Department of Revenue, if you did not have that on your NAICS code, you were not notified and you were not receiving checks from the state that started going out on the 11th this week. So I would encourage you to get a hold of someone at the Department of Revenue, and we can give you connections there. If your NAICS code, if you think you qualified, but it's likely due to the NAICS code that's in the state system. So.
All right. Well, thank you. A lot of information there. A reminder to everybody, if you'd like to give Kathi or Troy a question, you need to be on the YouTube platform, our Club E, that's Club Space E channel. You can submit a question. You also can do that on Facebook. For those of you out there who want to catch today's event later, you also can watch that on YouTube with past videos, or hit the podcast again. Clubby's available on your favorite podcast platform. And then lastly, again, hit the subscribe and like button. All right, for both of you, before kind of moving on, do have a question from Tim Y. Tim's a longtime participant of Clubby. Thanks, Tim, for being with us today. Tim wanted to know about community banks getting priority. And there's a couple of definitions here. We have the CDFI, the Community Development Financial Institutions, the MDI, Minority Deposit Institutions, but then ultimately may just go back to working with the banker that you have an existing relationship with. But why don't you both maybe comment on Tim's question, which really is, what's the best way to kind of move the PPP loan phase 2 process forward?
Sure, I guess I'll take a run at that, and then Kathi, you can join in. So just to clarify, the portal that we use to get approval for PPP loans is not currently open to most financial institutions. We anticipate, we speculate, maybe is a better choice of words, or the industry is speculating, that it'll open Friday, maybe Monday, something like that. Currently, it's only open to community development financial institutions, CDFIs, and minority deposit institutions, MDIs, and those are a more limited number. It's not just community banks versus large banks or something like that. It's a fairly finite set of financial institutions in most communities, and so those are the only ones that currently have access to putting in any applications. We expect when the portal does open up, though, there's some things to give consideration to. There are certainly some financial institutions that just have chosen not to participate in PPP this go around, so you should find out from your financial institution whether or not they're participating. I think the general advice I would give would be to work with, if you did a previous PPP loan, to continue to work with that institution or that organization that did the first one. I think generally they may have some of the information already that may be more speedy in terms of process. And so I think that makes the most sense to me. That'd be our general advice. Kathy, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it well. I think if you already have an existing business relationship with your bank, a strong one, that's where you should go first because they already have information and a history with your company.
Okay, so thank you again, Tim, for submitting the questions. I'm happy to try to go through other questions if anybody out there in our audience have those. All right, Troy, let's bounce back to you. Tell us a little bit about these new SBA loans and the modifications to existing loan programs.
Sure. I think, PPP 2 gets the big headline and that's what gets talked about. But I think it's really important to understand some other changes to SBA programs that were made as part of the passage of this bill. And I think those will have even longer term impact. So for new SBA loans that get generated after February 1st, all of the fees will be waived by the SBA for those loans, and that can be fairly significant. In addition, on what's referred to as 7A loans, which is a typical term loan, the guarantee goes up to 90% for banks, and that's important for borrowers because banks might be more willing to take some chances, especially given the recent financial performance of some companies. They may not qualify without that higher guarantee amount. And so that 90% guarantee on 7A loans shouldn't be missed. In addition to that, express loans, which are lines of credit, have been increased from a limit of $350,000 to $1 million. And so that is also a really important access to working capital. As businesses start to recover from this, take on new clients, a lot of times what happens is they get stressed for working capital. And having a larger express line of credit, which in conjunction with the fact that the guarantee is also increasing on express lines of credit from 50 to 75% for lines under 350 and under, those are really important tools as businesses recover and return to, I'll say normal. I don't really like that term so much, but return to something more similar to 2018-19. So I think it's really important to not miss those opportunities for funding in the future. For existing loans, anyone that has an existing SBA loan, they benefited from 6 months. Most borrowers benefited from 6 months of payments being made by the SBA, and they have extended that out for an additional 3 months. It's now capped at $9,000 a month per loan, but still that means that someone else is going to make your SBA payments for you for 3 months. It's kind of a tough thing to beat, right? Now, for those more underserved businesses, that can be extended by another 5 months. So that's up to 8 months of payments on your existing SBA loans. In addition to the benefits I mentioned on new loans for the SBA, they are also going to make 6 months of payments for any new SBA loans made after February 1st. So you're thinking about a new SBA loan. I just want to kind of repeat this. You won't have a fee. You'll have a higher guarantee, and you're going to get the SBA to make your first 6 months payments for you. That is a real incentive to work with your lender on SBA loans.
All right. Reminder for everybody, we will have the email addresses in the comments field of YouTube. Highland Bank, the website is highland.bank. You can learn more about them. And then the Minnesota Chamber's website is mnchamber.com. And Kathy, bounce it back to you. Talk a little bit about your program, Minnesota Chamber's Grow Minnesota, and its initiative to assist individual businesses with their recovery and growth. So tell us a little bit more.
The Grow Minnesota program in any given year is out statewide visiting with close to 1,000 businesses during this past year, 2020, we visited with about 450, which was pretty good since we lost about 4 months of visiting with anyone and just really tackling the initial COVID issues that were piling in. But out of those visits, we do one-on-one assistance. So specific to the company, we'll do customized assistance on something they may need. Can be anything from permitting to workforce training, that type of thing. And then we did set up 3 years ago our Minnesota Supplier Match program, which is a database online open to any Minnesota business to register on and then source from it. During COVID, we added a section on sourcing PPE supplies. So we did a lot of that over the last year, finding the supplies businesses needed to operate safely. But businesses can go on and source from that. There's no cost to any Minnesota business to register and source in that database. Its whole purpose is to strengthen supply chains within the state between the companies that we have here. And then quarterly, we have roundtables, which have been virtual around different topics to connect people who may be able to business with someone else within the state and open up those opportunities. We also, as the Minnesota Chamber, have resources for sustainability. So our WasteWise and Energy Smart programs are out working statewide to reduce waste and energy costs. And then the Minnesota Chamber provides small businesses resources to its members, including insurance products. So we really make those critical connections for businesses to help them. And then obviously, Grow Minnesota has been addressing any of the calls that come in around COVID. So the variety of assistance we're providing, I can't even tell you the differences and the number of businesses that I've linked to, from dental offices to churches to bars and restaurants. And we have a lot of empathy and are working hard to get the economy back and recovering.
All good work and much appreciated by the business community, I'm sure. So Kathi, a question again for you. Talk a little bit about what actions the Minnesota Chamber's Blueprint for Economic Recovery identify as necessary for our economic recovery.
Sure. We just released our blueprint for economic recovery this past week, and it can be downloaded from our website for people to see. And the blueprint really looks at recommendations for lawmakers to enact policies that are going to restore the livelihoods now and position our state for long-term growth. So the vaccine now has put us into a different phase than ever before. And now we have the economic imperative to really look at and position the state for this long-term growth. So I want to make sure I get these correct. So I'm going to be looking off to the side here, but in particular, our recovery blueprint looks at these policies, and those things we're really looking for lawmakers to play a key role in this economic recovery and avoid restrictions on business operations. So the things that we're really pushing: don't raise costs or burdens on businesses struggling to survive, help businesses with cash flow, provide additional tax relief, ease or allow flexibility on existing government assistance, enact COVID-19 lawsuit restrictions, support the public health response to COVID-19, help improve health and safety of employees, and increase consumer activity. So relying on Minnesota's economic strengths should continue. We have high value, hardworking, educated, and skilled workforce, and our state was built on innovation. It's a corporate hub, and having our diverse economy and industry clusters in key sectors like healthcare and medical technology is a huge benefit to our state's economy.
Okay, and I assume there's more information on the website on that?
Yes, the blueprint is much more extensive in what it portrays in graphs and charts, and then also more information in depth in different areas.
So again, the website is mnchamber.com. Again, mnchamber.com. Reminder to everybody, you can submit your questions into the comments field of YouTube or Facebook, and happy to try to get to those here on our call with Troy and Kathi. Troy, let's go back to you. Talk a little bit about the resources that are available for shuttered venue operators.
Sure. I think, you know, this ends up being a little bit outside the scope of what the bank is involved in, because this is more direct with the SBA. So they ultimately are a better source, but there was $15 billion set aside to make SBA grants to live venue operators. That includes such things as theaters, live performing, arts organizations. And so I think it's worth bringing up because, you know, whether you're a patron and enjoy those things, or whether or not you're on the board of those organizations, please be aware that the SBA has set aside significant dollars to help. And I think there's, if I have my numbers right, $2 billion set aside for those smaller organizations that employ less than 50 employees. And so look for those organizations in your contacts and who you associate with. Grants can be up to $10 million, and there can be a second grant for 50% of that. So it's significant dollars made available for those live organizations that really got missed in the first sort of go around of funding and PPP. And again, I think, you know, that's not something that the banks are doing, but a lot of banks involved in those organizations, and certainly a lot of people on your call are involved in those organizations. So it's more a point of reference than it is anything else.
So I had a question from Matt, also a longtime listener here at Club E. Thanks, Matt. Matt was wondering what were maybe some of the common themes you saw at your various clients or businesses that you interact with. I guess for myself, Brimacombe and Associates, the advisory practice that I run, Brimacombe Capital, the investment vehicle, we saw a lot of supply chain challenges. And then I think the other thing that bubbled to the top was customer concentration issues. And so therefore the ripple effect was felt in a big way for a company that maybe was weighted towards some small number of clients heavy. Similarly, if business is reliant on a small number of people and maybe haven't developed their second layer of management, and with the various health issues people have had, kind of the management team being the key word there, a broad team, all of those things were items and issues that we saw over the last 10 or so months. What kinds of issues were you two seeing at your clients and customers' businesses?
The supply chain issue was very real. What we saw and heard from companies is a lot more companies that are onshoring to have backup in their supply chains and not totally rely on having a supplier overseas, but bringing more things back to, if not Minnesota, to the United States, having domestic supply chains. The remote work, what's that going to do to their future workforce, to their facility? How will they continue to operate, and what will that look like? And then workforce skills. So what we saw with a lot of manufacturers is they had talked about, we're going to do more automation, digital, we're going to move to these different things in the next 3 to 5 years. And now they're saying, we're going to do that in the next 18 months. So how are we going to fund that? What are we, who's going to help us do that in real time, because it's needed? We can't have people on site, or it doesn't make sense to have them on site. So what processes can they automate quicker? And then the other big issue related to remote work, but was an issue prior, was childcare. So having affordable and available childcare. And I think a lot of people, the misnomer was that childcare was an essential service and it was up and running throughout this. And they suffered hugely with a lot of home childcare saying, I'm done. And with other large childcare centers not having a lot of people there because people either lost jobs, weren't comfortable bringing kids into the situation, or they were working remotely and no longer needed it. So I think there's a lot of things out there that in the businesses I've visited with, which are a huge variety, I expected a software business that I visited technology to be just like going like gangbusters. And overnight, they lost 33% of their clients because they offer a software that's a rewards program for salons. And they're a nationwide program. So I had no idea. So it was a real eye opener of how disproportionate COVID hit, even within sectors, manufacturing. If they supplied retailers, it was killing their business. So that I think has been an eye opener in the visits that we've seen. And the number one thing is still going to be people need workers. That was an issue before COVID-19, and as we recover, it is going to continue to be a huge issue to find the right people to fill the right positions and train them for those.
And that people, just a plug for a company that I'm interacting with right now, Bus Stop Mamas, BUS Stop Mamas. Anyway, one of my portfolio companies is looking to fill a couple of slots, and they have served up many highly qualified candidates for us. So again, Bus Stop Mamas would be a resource for folks out there. Troy, how about you? What have you been seeing with the various companies that you interact with?
Yeah, a lot of the same things that have already been mentioned. The work remotely has been a challenge. Who can do it? Are they set up from a technology standpoint to do it? I think that was a surprise for people that they weren't as prepared as they thought they were to do that. I would add to the child care, how you deal with children at home that are also being schooled at the same time, that using the same hardware, using the same Wi-Fi, if they even have it. Those were all issues. And as it relates to the business, how that impacted the productivity or the availability of some of their employees. I think those are all things that we saw. I would add one more that's a little more bankerish, and I would say I think a lot of businesses learned, that leverage is a two-edged sword, and they found that if they had a lot of leverage when they had a downturn, it certainly impacted them, and they did not have the liquidity or the staying power to survive some of the things you talked about, whether that's employee or employer or customer concentrations or supply chain. And if you have more leverage, it just makes that much more difficult. And so I think balance sheets sort of haven't really mattered as much over the last decade or two. But I think we found in this example that balance sheets did matter a bit more than what people thought. And so I would just add that from a financial standpoint.
Okay, great. We had a question from Rob. Rob also is a regular listener for us. Rob's question was, are there any new resources for sole proprietors?
Kathy, I would imagine that, whether they're a sole proprietor, your programs don't distinguish. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, our assistance doesn't, but if they're talking about some of the, like any of the PPP, some of those things that are out there now doesn't necessarily work for sole proprietors, but I would encourage people to check our database on our website within our COVID toolkit, where we have compiled all the county programs that are available with the state's funds that have come down now. And some of the county programs have maybe been a little more flexible And some communities in the state too have set up opportunities to help businesses through this too, although I think a few of those are loan programs, and at least from the Minnesota Chamber standpoint, businesses don't need more loans now. They need they need money that doesn't continue to put them in debt to recover out of this COVID-19.
Yeah, from a PPP standpoint, they have expanded the definition to include sole proprietors and self-employed individuals. And so certainly from a PPP standpoint, that is now an eligible borrower. And that was a little problematic in the first go around.
Yep.
Okay. And then Rob, if you're feeling stuck on something, feel free to reach out to me, Rick at brimacombe.com. Happy to try and help you further. Okay, so we do have time for any more questions. If anybody in the audience wants to submit those, and we'll try to weave them in. As we aim towards finishing up here, if you two had kind of one key thing that you wanted the audience to take away from today's session, what would that be and why? And I don't really care who wants to go first, whoever would like to tackle the question first.
I'll defer to Kathy.
Oh, thanks. I guess the one thing I would say is that through all of this COVID-19 and pandemic and the PPP and everything behind it, is people should really be seeing the impact that government decisions have on your livelihood as a small business. And I would encourage people to really reach out to your state legislators, your local officials, because the decisions they make directly impact your livelihood. And quite honestly, the majority of them have never run a business. So they want to hear from you. They want to listen with you. We're already having discussions, with the governor on a regular basis. We've continued to, he's been very receptive to working with us on behalf of private businesses. And are we going to disagree on things? Sure, but there's still an open line of communication to have those discussions. So I would encourage you to do that, and also reach out to our Grow Minnesota program. We exist to help Minnesota businesses grow here, and we really want to learn more about your operations and help you.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Troy?
Yeah, I think this is really about community education from my perspective. I mean, it's really important for us as a state and as a community to really understand the resources that are available through PPP, whether you're doing them with Highland Bank or with somebody else. And in addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to undersell the changes to the SBA programs that will be available during the course of this next year. I think those are really going to be important for businesses, allow them to get back on their feet, to expand. Perhaps maybe it's capital expenditures, maybe it's working capital. I think those are not to be undersold. And so I think this is, from my standpoint, just about educating the bank or the business community on what those opportunities are. I do have a couple other little miscellaneous things, Rick, that I would just like to mention that we didn't really cover anywhere here. Earlier, there were a number of businesses that received EIDL loans, EIDL loans, and early on, those were deducted from any forgiveness. So if you got a $10,000 EIDL grant, I should say, that was deducted from what you were able to get forgiveness on. That has been repealed as part of this. And so if you have already submitted your forgiveness application and received your forgiveness and did not get that portion forgiven, there'll be a process yet to be defined, but there'll be a process where you'll be able to get that money back. If you have not submitted your forgiveness application, when you do this go around, that EIDL loan will not be deducted from your forgiveness. So that's also good news for those businesses that got EIDL loans before. We touched earlier on the fact that this has really been referred to as a second draw. So it's for those businesses that already got a PPP loan. There is a first draw component of this for businesses that did not get a PPP loan originally, those businesses that are eligible. And so I just want to make sure that if someone was not sure if they qualified or didn't go through the exercise at the time, there is yet another opportunity to take a bite of that particular apple. And so, keep that in mind as well. And then lastly, on the application side, that there has been some press about a new shorter one-page application for the new second draw PPP loans, which is accurate. You do not have to supply, according to the application, all of the same information to justify, for example, the 25% decrease. That's accurate, but the SBA has said you will need that when you go for forgiveness of that loan under 150. So I think some organizations, I know we are going to try and collect that on the front end, because you're going to need it on the back end to get forgiveness anyway. And you'd sure hate to have a situation in which you think you're getting forgiveness and you didn't qualify for it, and you don't find that out until after you've spent the money and you're now going through the forgiveness process. So that's been the guidance from SBA, is to collect that on the front end. But there's a little, I'll say, unclear communication about that new application. So I just wanted to share that with the people listening today too.
Okay. Kathy, any other thoughts that come to mind on your part?
I cannot think of any
Okay.
at this time. Yeah, thank
All
you.
right. So just a reminder for everybody out there, Highland Bank is highland.bank. Minnesota Chamber is mnchamber.com. And you can reach out to Troy at info@highland.bank. You can reach out to Kathy at Grow Minnesota, spelled all the way out, at mnchamber.com. Troy and Kathy, thank you very much for joining us today. Look forward to having you back. So thank you again. And for you, Kathy, go Pack.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for the opportunity, Rick.
Yeah,
Thanks, Kathy. Bye-bye.